Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA Karen stories. In this video, an entitled racist HOA Karen called the cops on me because she thought I was too Asian and too casual to own a yellow Porsche. Big mistake, because my family owns the land her homeowner association is built on. But first, let's dive into a story where OP gets a tyrannic HOA lawyer disbarred. So the first one starts like this. Not me, but one of my best friends lived in an HOA 18 years ago. It started out with no issues for several years. One day, everything changed though. We worked as mechanics together, but he had a second job, a gun shop / range in the evenings. The shop was very popular and they had open hours for the range, but many of the popular times were reserved for paying members. They started doing construction on the range, allowing for more lanes and allowing for higher calibers to be used at the range. Because of the construction, there was many times the range would be closed with a few hours open for members only, and they were not accepting new members at the time. This is what started everything. So his neighbor across the street, the HOA president, wanted to use the range. My buddy had to explain that the only reservations for times were for existing members. The president wanted an exception, which my buddy couldn't accommodate, and the president made my buddy's life hell. He was getting fines for frivolous things left and right. His townhome had a garage which my buddy keeps a project car in. There's no room to work on the car, so it is just stored in there. During the winter he moves it to another friend's garage and then works on it. Every time my friend moved his motorcycle or the trash out of the garage and the president can see the incomplete car, he got a fine every single time just for opening his garage. Fines were for working on a vehicle in the HOA. He started moving the trash cans through the house and kept his motorcycle in the living room. His neighbor got a flat tire and my buddy helped the neighbor change the tire. There was another fine for working on a car and neighbor got a fine too. Bunch of other frivolous things. The HOA had a groundskeeper / maintenance man that worked for the president. The guy did odd jobs around the complex like plowing the snow, did yard work on public areas and so on. Well, my friend catches this guy hopping his fence to snoop around his backyard. He sends his dog after him and then restrains him face down in a pile of dog poop at gunpoint until the police arrive. That guy is arrested for trespassing and it comes out that he was here illegally and got deported. The HOA got a fine for having an illegal alien on the payroll. And suddenly my buddy gets a massive fine, ironically the same amount as the amount the HOA received, for owning a gun and restraining one of their employees. A bunch of trumped up charges. The HOA president was an ambulance chaser lawyer and all the fines were issued by his law practice. Well, my friend's uncle is a lawyer in another state but put him in touch with a lawyer here locally to help with this nonsense and found out that our state has some rule that you cannot issue a fine in retaliation to a fine, and the HOA president using his practice to issue the fines was illegal. So finally, the HOA president ended up getting disbarred and got legal charges for harassment. The fines ended up going away and the HOA president ended up losing his house and moving out. Furthermore, my buddy moved out today, the HOA like a year later when he bought a larger house. Still laugh about all the nonsense that happened like in 2008. And yeah guys, if you enjoy the HOA stories, and by the way this one was from r/askreddit, I really had to dig deep for it, then please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments if you want to go the extra mile. Either way, the next one is the title story, which is titled HOA Karen called the police on an Asian woman for owning a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. Ends up instantly regretting it. So this is a throwaway account because my family's business is boring in the most identifiable way possible, and I'm not trying to have my aunt's neighbors reverse Google her roof tiles. Also, yeah, this happened in Southeast Asia. And no, I'm not naming the country to protect my anonymity. Anyway, I'm an Asian woman in that late 30s to early 40s range where strangers cannot tell if you're a retired mom or a yoga instructor or both. I run a side of my family's agricultural business. Think rice, coconut / something you eat every day and never think about. It's work that involves warehouses, muddy shoes, and arguing about fertilizer. We make a lot of money and have been in the business for decades. I do not look rich, by the way. I'm essentially always dressing like I'm 5 minutes away from going to a checker pump motor, yoga pants, oversized shirt, hair in a messy bun, and zero makeup. If you saw me at a supermarket, you would assume I was there to buy ginger and leave. My one "I am an adult and no one can stop me" indulgence is my car, bright yellow Porsche 911 GT3 RS. And before anyone jumps in with "must be nice," it's not a family money bought me a toy thing. My parents are comfortable, but also very "we don't waste money." I bought it with my own money after a string of good years and because I've always loved cars. It is loud, it is stupid, it is perfect. Anyway, my elderly aunt lives in a gated subdivision that caters to foreigners and local upper-middle-class families who want a guardhouse, neat hatches, and a Facebook group where people complain about dogs barking like it's a human rights violation. And yeah, I visit my aunt regularly, not every week, but often enough that the guards recognize me on sight, usually. The only difference this day was that my usual normal car was being serviced, so I decided to take the Porsche because I had errands on the way and I wanted the fun drive. That's it, no flex, no plan. I pulled into a street and immediately remembered why I don't usually bring it. The road humps here are aggressive, the turns are tight, and the car announces itself like a firework. I parked in front of my aunt's house and grabbed a bag of fruit and groceries off the passenger seat. I had picked up for her because she loves pretending that she doesn't need help and then secretly being delighted when someone shows up with mangoes. I was halfway to her gate when I heard the classic territorial ahem. Across the street was the HOA president. I'm gonna call her Karen because, well, it fits and because she basically introduced herself as one within minutes. She's a foreign expat woman, not Asian, lives like she's been appointed queen of the street. Always has a clipboard, always has a hat, always has a look like she's smelling something questionable. I'd seen her before. She had tried to encourage my aunt to renovate, she had complained about my aunt's old fence, and she once suggested in a voice that was not a suggestion that my aunt's garden looked messy and dated. And by the way, my aunt's house is older than half the neighborhood. It's not falling apart, it just doesn't look like a resort. My aunt likes it that way. Anyway though, Karen beeline for me. She did the fake friendly thing first, you know the tone, the "I'm being polite because there are witnesses, but I'm already writing you up in my head." "Can I help you?" I said, still walking. "No thanks, I'm just visiting my aunt." Nodded toward the house like a normal person. Karen's eyes didn't move to the house, they moved to the car, and then back to me, like she was trying to match two puzzle pieces that offended her. "That is Mrs. Aunt's house," she said, emphasis on the Mrs. like my aunt belonged to her. "I know her. She's never mentioned a niece with a car like this." I didn't even stop, I just said, okay. Because I mean, what else do you say to that? Like, congratulations on your niece inventory? Karen stepped into my path a little, not fully blocking me, but making it clear that she wanted me to stop. "So, whose car is it?" "Mine." She did the little laugh that is not a laugh, the "sure honey" sound. "I'm the HOA president. We keep track of vehicles here for security and that car is not registered." "Well, I don't live here." I said, "I'm visiting family." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Visitors register too." That was not true. Visitors didn't register unless they were contractors or long-term. I know that because I'd been waved through plenty of times and I kept walking. My aunt's gate was open, she forgets to lock it, which drives Karen insane, and I was just trying to get to the front door before this turned into a whole thing. Karen followed me onto my aunt's property, like through the gate. That's when I got annoyed. I turned and said, "Please don't come inside the gate." She didn't even blink. "If you belong here, you won't mind clearing it up." She looked over my shoulder towards the Porsche and then back at me like she was seeing something illegal. "It's probably rented," she said loud enough that I'm pretty sure she wanted neighbors to hear. "Or borrowed. We've had issues with girls." She meant to say WHORES, but was apparently being polite, "bringing men and pretending they live here." I wanna be clear, she was not subtle about this. The vibe was very Asian women get money from foreign men, which is gross in any language, and I said, "I'm here to see my aunt. That's it." Karen's smile hardened. "Then tell me your aunt's name. Full name." This is where I realized we were not doing security, we were doing humiliation, so I said no. And then I knocked on my aunt's door because, shockingly, I did not want to stand on her porch proving my family tree to a woman who treats the street like her private club. My aunt opened the door almost immediately, she is nosy in the best way, and brightened up when she saw me. I stepped inside and Karen stayed outside for all of 10 seconds. She actually leaned forward like she was gonna follow me in. My aunt's face changed and she said, "What are you doing?" Karen snapped back into polite in front of elders mode. Just making sure everything is alright. There's a suspicious vehicle. My aunt looked past her at the Porsche and then back at Karen like she couldn't believe her life. That is my niece, my aunt said flat. She comes here all the time. Karen's eyes flicked to me, then to my aunt, then to the car again. I mean, apparently her brain couldn't process messy bun plus Asian woman plus GT3 RS without exploding. Well, she said, stretching the word, it is just unusual. My aunt started to say something sharp, but I did the thing I always do with my aunt. I gently redirected before she went full on auntie mode. Let's just have coffee, I told my aunt. It's fine. I figured that would be the end of it. A weird porch interaction, some gossip in the Facebook group, whatever, you know. But nope, because I forgot the most important rule of people like Karen. They don't stop when they are wrong, they stop when they are forced to. We were maybe 10 minutes into coffee, my aunt telling me about her new neighbor's loud motorcycle and me pretending I care, when we heard a knock that was not the friend knock. My aunt looked through the peephole, muttered something in our language that definitely was not a prayer, and opened the door. 2 police officers were standing there, polite and neutral. But very clearly there for a reason. One of them said there was a report about a suspicious person and a suspicious vehicle, possibly casing of homes, etc., and they asked if everything was okay. My aunt's face did that thing older women do, where they look calm but you can feel heat coming off them. That woman, my aunt said, pointing through the window like a prosecutor, called you. One of the officers glanced towards the street. And yep, Karen was outside, hovering near the curb, doing the concerned citizen pose, arms crossed, chin raised, looking like she was about to accept a medal. I stepped forward and said, "Hi, I'm her niece. That's my car. I'm just visiting." The officers asked for my ID. I gave it to them. They asked if the car was mine. I said yes, and they asked if I could show registration. I said sure, it is in the car. We walked out with my aunt behind me, and Karen stepped closer like she was about to narrate the whole thing. I heard her say something like, "She refused to identify herself properly and she acted aggressive." Me, in yoga pants holding fruit. The officers did their job, checked my ID, checked the registration, and checked whatever system they usually check. Everything matched, no drama, no handcuffs, and no shouting. Just an awkward little administrative moment while Karen stood there waiting for the "gotcha" that never came. One officer handed my documents back and said something like, "Alright ma'am, sorry for the disturbance." Karen's mouth tightened. "You're just letting her go?" The officer looked at her and I swear you could see the exact second he decided that he hated paperwork. "There's nothing to let go," he said. "She's visiting her family." Karen tried to pivot. "But that car—" "It is registered," the officer said. Karen's face did the thing where someone realizes they have lost but wants to keep fighting anyway, because losing feels like dying. "Well," she said louder, "how was I supposed to know? She doesn't look like—" She stopped herself. Too late, but she stopped. My aunt didn't stop though. "You have seen her," my aunt said, voice rising. "She visits me every month." You stand at the street with your clipboard like you own everyone and you still don't know who comes to my house? Karen got red. "I cannot remember every—" My aunt pointed at her. "You remember, you just choose." The neighbors were watching now, curtains moving, a few people stepping outside pretending they were watering plants or something. Someone had a phone in hand like they'd been waiting all week for content. Karen tried to salvage her dignity by going full bureaucrat. "I will be reporting this to the HOA board," she announced like that meant anything. My aunt laughed, actually laughed. "Report it." The police left, the immediate embarrassment was done, and Karen stomped away like a toddler who dropped their ice cream. I should have let it go there. If she had just been a rude neighbor, I probably would have. I have enough going on, and I don't sit around plotting. But the thing is, she didn't just embarrass me, she weaponized the police because she didn't like the idea that an Asian woman could own a car like that without an explanation that fit her worldview. And she did it on my aunt's porch. My aunt, who minds her business, pays her bills, and has been quietly taking Karen's nonsense for years because she simply doesn't like conflict. That was the part that stuck in my throat. After I left my aunt's house later, I was still annoyed in that way where you keep replaying it in your head and thinking of better comebacks you didn't say. I called my mom on the drive home and told her what happened. My mom listened quietly, and when I finished she said, very casually, "That subdivision? That's on your grandfather's land." I said, "What?" She repeated it like she was telling me the price of X. "Our holding company owns the land. It's a ground lease. It's one of your grandfather's old safe investments. The property management firm handles it and we just get reports." I had this mental image of my grandpa who could negotiate like a gangster while wearing sandals, signing something decades ago and never mentioning it again because he treated land the way other people treat savings account. I said, so the homeowners don't own the land? They own their houses, my mom said, not the land under the whole development though. The HOA pays ground rent. It's all very boring. Why? And when I told her about Karen, there was a pause. My mom didn't sound angry, she sounded interested, which is worse if you grew up with my mom. Send me your name, she said. I said, why? Because if she's causing trouble for your aunt, she's probably causing trouble for other people too, and if the HOA is mismanaged, it becomes our problem eventually. This is where I should mention something. My family's not the evil rich landlord. We are boring. We lease land to developments through long-term agreements. We hire professional managers. We don't micromanage. We simply like stability. My parents' idea of drama is a late shipment. We also don't like being dragged into nonsense. I got home, showered, put on normal clothes, and did something I'd literally never done in my life before. I opened the shared family drive and searched for the subdivision. There it was, a scanned ground lease agreement, extensions, amendments, annual summaries, and a folder of emails from the property management company that I'd never read because the subject lines were things like annual rent remittance confirmation. I started reading and I learned 3 important things. First, the lease had a rent review clause every 5 years. Second, it hadn't been reviewed in a long time because my family never triggered it, because the rent was just fine. Also because nobody cared enough to squeeze money out of it. And third, there was a clause requiring landowner approval for permanent structures or modifications to common areas, not the tell us after, approval before, and according to the files, the HOA had been creative. A guardhouse upgrade, a small clubhouse expansion, a pool area that definitely didn't exist in the original plan, and some landscaping, walls and signage. Things that look normal if you're a resident. Things that are very not normal if you're the person whose permission they were supposed to get. I called the property management company the next day. I didn't storm in screaming, I didn't threaten anyone, I just asked some questions. Do we still own the land under the subdivision? Yes, ma'am. Has the rent review been done recently? Long pause. Not in quite a while. Why? Careful voice. It's initiated by the landowner. We can recommend it, but we cannot trigger it without instruction. Have you recommended it? Another pause. We have mentioned it in annual notes. Translated from property management language. They tried and no one cared. I said, okay, next question. Have they requested approvals for common area structures? The person on the phone sighed, like I'd asked about their worst client. No, we have sent reminders and we have asked for documentation. They usually don't respond. I asked, do you have those reminders in writing? Yes. I sat back and stared at my living room wall, because in my head, revenge had been something like embarrassing Karen publicly, posting about her online, getting her kicked off the HOA board somehow, but this was bigger, this was structural. If Karen wanted to play Who Belongs, fine, let's talk about Who Belongs. I told my mom what I found and she didn't sound surprised. She sounded like someone who had just found out the kitchen faucet has been leaking for months and now it's time to fix it properly. My mom said, if you want to handle this, you can. You're old enough. Just don't be reckless. I said, define reckless. Anything that ends up on the news. She said, fair. So here's what I did. First, I asked the property management company for a full compliance review, what approvals were required, what was missing, and what notices had been sent already. Then I asked for the homeowner association's current contact details and official address for service, not because I plan to show up and yell, but because if you do this properly, you don't email somebody's personal Gmail and then hope for the best. Then I told the property management company to initiate the rent review per the lease. This was not raise rent because I'm mad, this was trigger the clause that exists. The rent was genuinely below market because it had been left alone for so long. The review used external valuation. It was not me throwing out a number like a cartoon villain, it was professionals doing what professionals do. At the same time, I instructed them to send a formal notice regarding unauthorized common area structures, not remove everything tomorrow. The notice was basically, you're in violation, provide approval requests and as-built documentation within a set period. If you want to keep these structures, apply for retroactive approval and pay the administrative fees required under the lease. If not, remediate. The key here is that I didn't want residents punished for Karen's ego. I wanted the HOA Karen's little kingdom to feel consequences for acting like the landowner didn't exist, because that's what she had been doing socially too. She was treating the neighborhood like she owned it, controlling who belongs, making up rules, leaning on people who didn't want conflict. I did not want to destroy the place, essentially. My aunt lives there, I wanted to correct it, and I wanted Karen to stop. Anyway, the first letter went out, then the second, then the HOA responded, and finally, with a very angry email full of exclamation points, not to me at first, to the property management company, accusing them of harassment, saying the HOA had never been told about approvals, implying the landowner was taking advantage and demanding the rent stay the same for the good of the community. I love when people put nonsense in writing. The property management company forwarded it to me with a note that basically said, "How would you like to proceed?" And I said, "Proceed exactly as the lease allows." A few days later, I got my first direct contact from Karen, a demand. She wrote that I should cease interfering, that the community was private and that she would be seeking legal remedies. And also, and I swear I'm not making this up, she wrote, "We don't appreciate being bullied by locals with money." Locals with money. I read it twice to make sure I was not hallucinating. Then I forwarded it to my mom and the property management company and replied with one sentence, "Please direct all correspondence through the property management company per the ground lease." That was it. Karen could not handle that. That was because Karen's power was not real power, it was social power, clipboard power. The "I know people" power. The kind that works on neighbors who just want a quiet life, but it doesn't work on lease documents. A couple weeks after the notices, the HOA called an emergency meeting. My aunt, being my aunt, got herself invited anyway, because she's been there forever and she knows how to weaponize politeness. She called me after and said, delighted in that way only elderly women can be when they've witnessed chaos, "She is panicking." I said, "Karen?" My aunt said, "Yeah, she stood up and talked about you, like you're some kind of criminal, like you planned this to attack her." I said, "Did anyone believe her?" My aunt made a little noise. Some people always agree with the loudest person in the room, but not everyone. They are tired of her. Apparently the HOA board had finally realized the problem was not the mean landowner, the problem was their budget could not absorb a rent adjustment easily, and they had structures that were technically unapproved, meaning they either had to pay fees to regulate them or risk being forced into remediation. The board wanted a compromise, Karen wanted a war. I didn't stop at raising rent, that would have punished everyone, including my aunt, and I didn't want residents to suffer because Karen is awful, so I did two additional things. Both completely legal, both allowed, and both designed to hit the HOA leadership where it hurts, while giving residents a path out. So first, I offered the HOA a structured transition instead of chaos. Through the property management company, I proposed a phased rent adjustment still based on the review, but stepped over time, contingent on compliance. Proper approval submitted, retroactive fees paid for the unauthorized structures, and a commitment to professional governance standards. Basically, we will make it manageable, but you will stop pretending the lease doesn't exist. Second, I required the HOA to appoint an independent professional administrator, not Karen, to liaise with the property manager for compliance, not forever, just during the remediation period. So that wasn't me taking over the neighborhood or something, this was me saying, your current leadership has proven they cannot be trusted to handle basic obligations, so for a period, someone qualified will be the point of contact. And yes, I knew exactly who would hate that. The person who would hate that the most, of course, was Karen, because Karen's whole identity was being the gatekeeper, the person who decides, the person who is consulted, the person who can corner you on a sidewalk and demand your aunt's full name. A professional administrator cuts that off at the knees. Suddenly, she's just a loud woman at meetings. The HOA board fought me on it at first, they claimed it was humiliating, and they said it was unnecessary, so the property management company sent them the email chain and the reminders. The missed approvals, the ignored requests, the fact that they'd been out of compliance for a long time, and my personal favorite, Karen's email calling me a local with money. That email made the rounds quietly among the board, not because anyone liked me personally, they didn't know me, but because even people who don't care about racism don't love blatant stupidity when it creates expensive problems, and suddenly Karen was not the strong leader protecting them from outsiders anymore. Karen instead was the liability. The board agreed to the professional administrator begrudgingly, but they agreed, and then Karen did what she always does when she's cornered. She escalated. She showed up at my aunt's house. My aunt called me mid-visit the next time I came over in my normal car because honestly I was tired of my Porsche being a neighborhood character. "She's here," my aunt said, calm as a bomb. "Come to the living room." I walked in and Karen was sitting there like she owned the couch. Smiling too hard, she started talking fast like she had rehearsed on the drive here. She said the HOA was considering banning my car from entering, and she said I was disturbing the peace. She said residents were concerned about outsiders, and then because she cannot help herself, she leaned in and said something like, "People like you don't understand how these communities work. This is an expat area. We maintain standards." My aunt said very quietly, "Get out of my house." Karen laughed like my aunt had told a joke. My aunt repeated it louder. Get out. Karen stood up, her face going tight. You will regret. I cut in and said, please put anything you want to say in an email through the administrator. Karen looked at me like she wanted to slap me, but remembered that there were consequences in real life. She stormed out, my aunt closed the door behind her and immediately said, I hate her. I said, same. 2 days later, the professional administrator started. And the first thing they did, because they were competent and not emotionally invested, was request the HOA's records, budgets, approvals, vendor contracts, minutes. Guess who didn't like that? Guess who had been handling everything personally? Apparently, Karen had been treating HOA operations like her private notebook, vendors she preferred, fines she interpreted, rules she enforced. The administrator found inconsistencies fast, just a kind of messy selective governance that flourishes when nobody pushes back. Suddenly, residents who had been quietly annoyed for years had a legitimate channel to complain, and they did. The landscaping crew that Karen accused of theft? The complaint resurfaced again. The Asian family she had tried to cite for cultural decorations that were not actually against bylaws? That came up too. Her pattern became visible, and once something is visible in a community like that, it spreads like wildfire. The HOA board started getting nervous too. A residents' meeting got scheduled. I did not want to go, I genuinely didn't. I hate being the center of attention, but my mom said, you started this process, you should at least show your face once, calmly. So I went, not dressed fancy, still casual, because the point was not to prove that I'm rich or something. The point was to prove Karen does not get to decide who belongs. The meeting was messy in the way community meetings always are. Karen tried to take control early though, doing her usual speech about security and standards. And this time though, she got interrupted by multiple residents. One guy stood up and said, you called the police on a visitor, on someone's niece, over a car. Karen tried to justify it. Another woman said, you post pictures of people's cars, that's creepy. Karen tried to talk over her, and then an older local man, very calm, said, we're discussing compliance and finances, not your personal feelings about who looks like they should drive what. That line hit like a slap. Karen started to unravel. You could see it. When people like her lose the room, they don't gracefully step back, they flail, and she said she was being attacked. She said she was protecting the community. She said the landowner, aka me, was punishing everyone because of a misunderstanding. That's when I finally spoke up, and I kept it short because I didn't want a monologue. I said, I didn't trigger the lease review because I was offended. I triggered it because the HOA has been out of compliance for years. The approvals were not submitted, the notices were ignored, and the rent review clause exists whether I like it or not. Then I looked at Karen and added, and I didn't call the police. You did. It then got very quiet. Karen did that thing where she tries to laugh, but it comes out like a cough. She said, well, you have to understand where I come from. If someone shows up in that kind of car, and without thinking, she said the quiet part out loud, and she looks like that. There it was. People reacted at once, not dramatic gasps, just that shifting discomfort when someone says something ugly plainly. The HOA board chair, a local guy who looked exhausted, asked Karen to just stop talking, but Karen did not stop talking. She went on about standards and girls and foreign men and security risks with cheap-looking women like me. And then the professional administrator did the single most satisfying thing I've ever seen a calm person do. They said evenly, Madam, that's not relevant to the agenda. Also, it's inappropriate. Karen snapped, and who are you to tell me what's inappropriate? This cheap bitch came in here waltzing into our neighborhood in a stolen Porsche. You want me to believe that a cheap SLUT like her can afford a car like this? And even if she does not deserve a car like this. Hardworking people like me deserve to have nice cars, not people like her. I am the president. And the board chair, finally growing a spine, said, not anymore. They announced that Karen would be removed as HOA president effective immediately and that an interim committee would work with the administrator. Karen's face did something I cannot even describe, like her brain was trying to diffuse reality. She started saying it was illegal, that she would sue, that the board couldn't do that and that she had supporters, and someone in the back said, go home. Another person said, stop embarrassing yourself. Karen grabbed her bag and left in the middle of the meeting, heels angry, head high, doing the classic, I'm storming out but I want you to beg me to stay. The HOA worked with the administrator, they submitted proper documentation for the structures, and they ended up paying retroactive administrative fees, which again is not me being evil, it's literally in the agreement for unauthorized modifications. They agreed to a stepped rent adjustment to avoid shocking residents, and if Karen ever sees that yellow Porsche again, she can remember the day she tried to play gatekeeper and accidentally reminded me that some gates have owners. Edit, because people keep asking what happened to Karen. Last week I was catching up with a friend who works in immigration services. We were talking over food and I mentioned the HOA Karen who tried to get me arrested over a Porsche. My friend stopped drinking her tea, looked at me with wide eyes. "Wait," she said. Was her name Karen? Well, it turns out when Karen moved, she attracted attention. It seems that while she was busy in her HOA kingdom, she had neglected her own paperwork, and a lot of it. My friend told me that Karen had been living on a specific type of visa that strictly forbids working, yet she had been running an unregistered consulting side business for years. She hadn't declared the income, hadn't paid the taxes, and hadn't updated her address properly. Someone, and I honestly don't know who, though my aunt has had a very smug look on her face lately, tipped off the local immigration bureau and tax authorities. Finally, Karen was arrested for tax evasion and visa fraud. The authorities here do not play around with foreigners who think they're above the law. She spent a week in a detention center, which I guarantee had zero HOA standards, was slapped with a massive fine that wiped out whatever savings she had, and was then deported. She is apparently permanently blacklisted from re-entering the country. The woman who tried to gatekeep me from my own family's land because I didn't look like I belonged got kicked out of the entire country because she actually did not belong. And the next one is a malicious compliance story, which is titled, "You are not to get involved in your mom's Facebook stuff." So my dad's words years ago when I started a discussion with my mom over some dumb racist crap she said on Facebook. Facebook brings out the worst in my mom, who in real life used to be a lovely woman, but over the years got lost in her echo chamber of stupidity. I tried getting her out, but I am not to get involved in my mom's Facebook stuff. Well, today there was an illegal protest in my city, a protest organized on Facebook by the lowest of the low of our society. We got a group of about 100 delusionals in our country who are actually willing to get from behind their keyboards and disrupt public transport in my city any opportunity they can get in the name of the people. My parents, not a part of the 100 but seem to be well on their way, went to today's protest, and the protest was illegal. They were told to separate and leave. They didn't, and they got arrested. They didn't have any form of identification on them, so they were not allowed to leave. My dad then called for the first time this afternoon, asking me to go to their place, pick up the IDs, then to the police station. I asked if this was about the Facebook event. He said yes, and I said, I better not get involved then. Hung up and ignored his next 17 calls. My aunt apparently went to pick them up later tonight, and everyone is pissed at me, saying I'm a traitor, except for Grandma, who called to say that she misses me and I haven't been able to get the grin off my face. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.